I'm Priscilla.
I'm Yessie.
And welcome to
Nena's Hangout.
So today we get to sit down and talk with you guys about our experience being the oldest daughter or the eldest child. And while that comes with a lot of pros, like being very independent, being selfless, and being goal-oriented, it also comes with a lot of pressure.
Pressure to be a role model because you have your siblings looking up to you, and pressure to make sure that your family members are okay, and pressure to do well in most aspects of your life.
But, you know, all of that has made us whom we are today. And I can personally say myself that slowly but surely I am getting out of that generational trauma of being a third parent, you know, and kind of identifying myself as a third parent.
Prissy, what does being a sibling mean to you?
To me, being a sister means being accepting of my brothers as who they are and whom they're becoming, you know, accepting that they're not perfect and that they have some sides that are not the greatest sometimes, but same with me, you know, like they can see some sides that not everybody gets to see, and they still accept me. I would say that is being a sister, being loving to my brothers, and being there for them even more, supporting them even more whenever they're not getting along with my parents.
I think for me, being a sister is being their partner in crime. Yeah. Especially whenever they're our parents. Especially when our parents están en el house con ellos or whatever. It also means that I'm their number one fan. Like, I'm always rooting for them. I'm always trying to push them to be better and always celebrating their successes. Yeah. And one thing that I realize is that the relationship that you have with your siblings is going to be the longest relationship you have. My sister Josie, hello Josie, she was there when I was 3, and she's going to be there for the rest of my life, even after my parents passed away. My sisters also know a side of me that is not pretty. And I know a side of them that is not that pretty, you know? Yeah. I can be very bitchy and sassy, and they know that. But yeah, I think that I am best friends with my sisters. I think they're the best friends that I was blessed with. And I know not every relationship is like that. Yeah. I know that sometimes, unfortunately, some siblings have very toxic relationships. Yeah. And just like any other relationship, if it's toxic, walk away. It's okay.
Before we get on to this topic even further and deeper, I want you guys to have, I guess, an idea of what we're going to be talking about. In this case is being the eldest daughter. So, Yessie, what is being the eldest daughter syndrome?
Well, it's not a clinical diagnosis. It encompasses various roles and expectations placed on the oldest daughter, such as caretaker role model expectations, we're going to talk about that one, hyper independence, and parentification. So yes, it's something that a lot of people can relate to. Yeah. If we are going to talk about daughters, we're not men, so we don't know
that experience. Yeah.
So we're just going to talk about our experience. And to kick it off, we're going to talk about the role modeling experience. In what areas were you told that you had to be a role model in?
I was reminded that I was being watched every single day, anytime that I wanted to do something social. Because my parents, I don't know, they used to think that being outside and, you know, having a social life meant that you weren't doing what you were supposed to do, you know, doing good in school. Like, why would you be wasting time over there when you could be studying or helping out the family somehow? So anytime that I wanted to have a social life outside of my home, I was reminded of that like I'm being watched, that if I don't prioritize school, I'm like setting an example of rebellion for my brothers. That would carry on to later on society, as in if my brothers started to rebel against my parents, then they will later on start rebelling against society and higher powers.
Like a little chain, like a domino effect.
Exactly.
For me, it's also school. You have to be a great student because your sisters or your siblings are watching. I have a very vivid memory of my mom telling me that I had to like be a straight A student because Josie is gonna follow into my footsteps. So that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's also a lot of pressure for the other siblings, right? Because it can cause harm to our relationship. There were times where my mom would compare my achievements to my sister's achievements, right? Or vice versa. And I felt like that put us in like a position of competition or rebellion. At some point, my sister was like, well, yes, he's the golden child.
Yeah.
She's the one that is the straight A student, the honor roll student. So why should I even try? You know? So it can be a very difficult position. And for me as well, because I don't want to disappoint my parents, but at the same time, like I don't want to like harm the relationship that I have with my sister.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Yeah, especially because being told by your parents that like if you don't set a good example, your siblings will follow. Obviously, at least me, like with a younger mind, I was like, what they're telling me is true. Like if I show them that I can be a rebel, they're gonna start rebelling and they're gonna not follow the rules eventually.
So I understand where my parents were coming from, our parents were coming from, but yeah, it was not the way
to do it. Yeah, there's better ways to teach a child and to be a role model, you know? Being a role model doesn't mean being perfect and not ever making mistakes.
Right. Given that, like how old were you when you felt like the third parent? You know, parentification is a thing when a child bears that role of being like a third parent, the third adult in the household. So when did you feel like that?
My mom's a stay-at-home mom, so thankfully I wasn't like a solid third parent. But you know, because my parents don't speak English, I was in charge from a very early age, maybe like 13, to enroll my brother and myself in school. Also, like once I got my first car, I also started helping out with, you know, the errands that my brother needed, helping out my dad. Whenever I had my first job, I was told that I had to give my family money because that's what a good daughter does. I think that as soon as my parents realized that I am a reliable, responsible human being, the more they started to solely just rely on me to do certain things that, you know, they could have tried to do. They could have tried to help me at least a little bit, but they just wouldn't because maybe they were afraid. I don't know. So I would say that's when I felt like a third parent or the third adult, whenever I had to be in charge of bank accounts and, you know, moving the family to different apartments and applying places. What about you?
I think as the oldest, I had to wear a lot of hats. 3 major ones were being like a teacher to my sisters, so helping them with homework, because my parents, again, similar to yours, they didn't speak English, right? So when the homework was in English, they couldn't read it and they couldn't write it. So it was up to me to make sure that my sisters did the homework and they did it well, you know, not just hacía medias. No, it had to be done well. And I think another one would be like whenever my mom would come to me with her marriage problems to talk about my dad. And so being like a marriage counselor was also another hat that I had to wear. And it was a very difficult one because I had never been through a marriage, you know. I didn't even have a relationship or anything like that. So my mom needed a friend and a therapist. She found one in me. And I think another one was being like a sex educator for my sisters, just because that's something that we don't talk about. So whenever my sisters were growing up and going through like puberty, like it was like they came to me to ask those hard questions about their bodies, about boys, about the feelings that they had. So yeah, it was a lot, being the accountant, being all of that you were saying, plus being like all of these other things. Like it's a hard role to fulfill. Yeah,
because you're fulfilling all of these roles, but you also have to look after yourself too. Like you can't forget about yourself. So it sounds like pressure is just a common thing for being the oldest sister. In what areas do you feel like you feel the most pressure?
From a very early age, I remember always being the one to take the lead and put the fires away. So I told myself that I had to fix everything, that I had to make it. So all my parents' sacrifices were paid off, and it was all worth it in the end. And I had to be perfect, right? I had to make the money. I had to retire my parents. If something happened to them, I had to be ready to take care of my parents. Oh, okay. I'm going to be vulnerable with you guys.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. So a few months after I graduated college and after I came to Dallas, we found out that my dad was at risk of being deported. It's for over half a year. I was in this like, oh shit, like what are we gonna do if that happens, right? Because if my dad goes, then I had to be the provider for my family, for a family that I love, but I didn't ask to be that, you know? And so it was a really tough experience because losing a parent is tough, right? I wasn't going to lose my parent, but I know like it was up to me to make sure that my sisters finished college. Thank God nothing happened. Thank God. But you know, like that pressure, that's just a glimpse of what we have to do. And it's not, I'm not gonna say that it's not fair, but it feels like it's not fair.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Like it automatically comes to you like, okay, if the main provider is gone, like it all lays on me. So I feel that. Honestly, I think for me, I felt the most pressure whenever I had doubts about a certain process, you know, like a bank something, or if we were applying to an apartment or whatever it may be. The idea of not knowing what something meant, not understanding a certain process was a lot for me, because if I messed up, it was on me. Like if my parents paid a down payment for an apartment and then maybe I didn't understand a sentence and we lost the down payment, it would all lay on me. Like, you know,
and that's a lot of pressure coming for also like from a low income family. That like $1,000 is like,
it's $1,000. It's a lot. It's and you know,
sometimes it's all the money that we saved up.
And so to me, that's when I felt the most pressure, because I felt like I couldn't have room to mess up. I couldn't afford to mess up for me or my parents. And I was under the impression that if I go down, I'm bringing my whole family down. And I was only like 12, 13 when I was going through all of this. So that, I would say that's what made me feel the most pressure, because I had, you know, my dad who has heart problems, my mom, and my little brother, you know. So I feel like just carrying them with me everywhere I went was like the most pressure, for sure. Do you feel like that pressure, you know, that we were talking about, do you think that it was our parents that put it all on us, or do you think that maybe it was us? Or maybe both? Because I personally think that it definitely started with our parents, like with my parents. But I think that later on, like I said, I carried it with me, and it became part of my identity that I was the second provider, you know, that I was the second provider, that I was someone else that like my brother would look up to, and someone else that my mom could come to if she had problems with my dad or whatever. And I feel like to this day I can still feel that pressure to behave myself, because I know that I'm being watched, not just by my brothers, but you know, by other people as well.
Yes, I totally agree that it started with my parents, like the pressure to be perfect all the time. But later it became part of my personality, to become the problem solver, to become the organizer, and be the hyper independent one, right? The one that is the reliable one, the one that is going to make things happen. And sometimes I wonder how much all of that is really me. Yeah. You know, like sometimes I wonder, like, okay, is this really who I am? Yeah. Like naturally, organically, is that really who I am? Sometimes I want to like reject that idea and be something, be soft, be like, you know, like in my own world. Yeah. and it's hard to deny that you were that person for many, many, many years.
So do you feel like the pressure to do well and be perfect, it was common? How did you feel the first time that you weren't perfect? The first time that you broke that, and where you're like, I'm done, you know?
I'm done being perfect.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because perfection has been manifested in many different parts of my life. Because I don't trust others to do it the way it should be, you know? And it's really hard for me to ask for help. And this has obviously negatively affected my relationships with people. And so I let go of this idea of perfection whenever I realized that the people around me that love me wouldn't offer their help if it wasn't because they didn't want to be there in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So your community is there to have your back and to carry that weight on your shoulders. And that allowed me, by having that foundation, that community, it allowed me to just chill, to relax, and to not be perfect all the time. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay if we have to record this 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to mess up.
Yes,
There's nothing wrong with that.
And so, yeah, what about you?
The first time that like I didn't feel perfect or that I didn't meet a certain expectation from my parents, I felt like I was a bad person. I felt like I was a bad daughter, and I felt like I was setting this horrible example for my brothers. And I used to think that like my mistakes and my failures define me. Like for me, doing good things was just part of my normal. It was like, oh, it's common. Like I wouldn't get rewarded for it because that's what you have to do.
That's the standard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But whenever you messed up, or I messed up, like I just felt like, damn, like am I gonna be homeless after this mess up? Am I gonna is my brother gonna be a rebel? Is he gonna be into drugs because of this? Like, oh, it could be a small thing, but the small thing in my head would grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Like you said, a domino effect. Obviously, resentment can be experienced for having to mature at a much younger age and much faster than our siblings. Like, what is a boundary that you set now to not feel that resentment, to get rid of that resentment?
I feel like I took a very harsh approach to this because it got to the point where I was, enough was enough. I need to go. I need to leave. Bye. See you whenever I see you.
Yeah.
Right. And so I distanced myself immensely from my parents, especially because I was in another state. So it was so easy for me not to deal with their mess and their toxicity. However, I realized that I love them. Right. And I love my sisters. And I did not want to be without a family because family is important. And it took me a few years to realize that. But it is for me, and I care for them so much. And so with my parents, with my sisters, it was easy. You know, they knew that they could always count on me for whatever. But for my parents, it was definitely tough because I tried to help them, but if they didn't want to help themselves, then what was the point, right? And so it wasn't until my dad's legal situation that it was a wake-up call for them, that it was like, shit, we have to get our shit together. And so whenever they started doing that, then I was like, okay, then I can make an effort to heal this relationship because they're putting 100% and I'm putting 100%. Definitely my dad, he has taught me that people can change no matter how old they are. And right now, I am pouring into him only because he is pouring into himself. That's a boundary that I realized that I needed. If they're not going to help themselves, then I'm not going to put energy into it because it's just going to be a toxic cycle. And I don't want to have a relationship with toxic parents. You know?
No, and if you let that bad treatment keep happening, it's going to become normal to you that if the closest people are treating you this way, anyone else is gonna seem normal.
Exactly. And we don't want that.
No.
At all.
Nope. A boundary that I have now is cuando se puede, you know? Cuando no. And
that's a good one.
For me, I feel like I used to go above and beyond to do whatever my parents needed at the moment that they needed. And I would stop anything and everything that I was doing to help them and to do whatever it was that they needed. Even if what I was doing I loved and I cared about so much, helping my parents had to come first. It was just instinct. So,
and is it because they expected that from you? Or because you thought that that's what they expected from you?
Well, you know, at first when I was little, it was that. I felt that expectation from them. especially from my mommy, but after, you know, it definitely became like part of my identity. I felt like, you know, I carried it with me. I thought that it would be a life or death situation if I didn't help my parents. And with time, you know, I've come to realize, and thankfully my family has shown me, that if I mess up or if I'm not able to fulfill an expectation that they have of me, they're not going to stop loving me. They're not going to stop calling me their daughter. And I guess I used to think that they would. I guess I used to think that they would disown me and just hate me or whatever.
Because it can sometimes happen.
Yeah.
I've seen it in my family with women that get pregnant too young, or whenever they do something that they're
not supposed to.
Yeah, that society doesn't deem right. Like, they're literally disowned. So the fear is real and it's valid because it has happened.
So growing up, you know, we've had a lot of responsibility on our shoulders, and whether if it was imposed by our parents or self-imposed, despite being as mature for our age, our parents still held authority. They still held power. Yeah. So what were some things that you were not allowed to talk about or do during your upbringing?
Boys. I was not allowed to talk about boys or to talk about like my feelings or anything like that, like my romantic feelings.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned before, there are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to sex and our bodies. And so I could never talk to my parents about that. I was also told that wearing tampons was not for señoritas.
I know. Oh my God, me too.
But it was all fake. It was fake news. Like, and it was up to me to figure things out to then pass down to my sisters. But I think that's one main one that, oh yes, you're so responsible. You're doing great. But you cannot go on dates. You cannot think about boys. Yeah. So I think that one was like a very harsh contrast to how mature I was, even though like they still treated me like a kid.
I know, nada más cuando les conviene, I swear.
Right, yes.
That's how I felt. Literally, I didn't have a social life outside of school for the longest time. The reasons that I was given for this was there's no safer place like home. And my mom would constantly tell me that I'm not missing out on anything. You know, by having a social life, I wasn't missing out on anything. Even though my parents would tell me how much they trusted me, and they would tell me that they didn't trust the world. Yeah. Which I think it's BS, you know? And because of that, I wouldn't really be able to talk about my experiences that I had. I also wasn't able to talk about boys. And even if I had the greatest adventure of my life, an adventure that made me feel like this is what life is. This is the meaning of life. I couldn't talk to my parents because I knew that they would judge me or that they would make me feel like I did a bad thing when I knew I didn't, you know? So that's something that I wouldn't be able to talk about with my parents. Anything that wasn't related to school or home, it wasn't talked about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And it's really sad.
It is. It keeps you from building a connection, a deeper connection with your parents. It keeps you from, you know, them seeing different versions of you. Because I feel like I was only able to show my parents the good girl side of me. But I don't know if they saw the funny side of me or the risk taker, how confident I can be when I didn't know that I could be confident. And, you know, by having later on like that social life that I wanted and the experiences that I wanted and needed to have, I was able to also see, oh, I think this way because of my mom, or I am this way because of my dad, or I'm this way because of neither of them, and because I want to not be like them, I'm becoming this way.
Another person,
you know?
Yeah. So I mentioned that we had to learn a lot of things first to then pass down to our siblings.
Yeah.
So as an older sibling, what has been your proudest moment for yourself and for your siblings?
So, proudest moment for myself, I would just... Honestly, I'm proud of whom I'm becoming right now. I feel like I'm no longer an autopilot. I'm no longer in just like work, and doing what I need to do to get to the next level. I'm proud that I willingly went back to college. I'm proud to keep my job. I'm proud that, you know, to have this podcast, this community that we're building, all whilst maintaining myself well and alive and in every aspect of my life. And for my brothers, honestly, like, I'm just so proud of like how kind they are, and just like, I'm sorry, but it's just like they're just so sweet. Like, I genuinely used to feel like if I messed up, or if they would see me failing or being a rebel, that they would be a rebel. I genuinely used to think that they would be bad, or that they would think of me less or love me less. But honestly, like, they have proven to me like completely opposite. Like, they are so sweet, they're so smart, and sometimes I think that they're smarter than me. I want them to be smarter than me. I want them to have higher goals than I do, and I'm just proud to be their sister, because I'm the only girl. So I'm glad that like God gave me just my brothers, because I feel like I never really have needed a boy's love, because my brothers, I have my brothers, I don't have to worry about like somebody looking and making me feel like a princess.
Yes. Oh, that is so beautiful. But, yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. But just who they are is like, that's what makes me proud, honestly.
Yes. I know, I can totally relate to that. I'm very proud of the sisterhood that we built, because it's the foundation that is hopefully going to last many generations to come. We're the first women to break generational traumas and curses. We're the first women to respect each other, to not be catty, to not hate on one another. Like, it's truly like a sisterhood. And I can only hope that in the future, women in my family continue this legacy of empowerment, of love and respect for our gender.
Yes. Amen. Amen. That needs to be everyone's goal, to be honest. How did your parents' parenting style differ from you and your siblings?
Yes.
Because for me personally, so there's a big age gap between me and my brothers. There's between 8 and 10 years old. So obviously, because of that big of an age gap, I feel like I was seen as their younger mom. And I'm not gonna lie, I did like that feeling of authority and power. I knew that whatever I said, like, it had to be, they had to follow whatever I had.
It's Priscilla's way.
Yeah, exactly. But prior to that, I grew up with my grandparents, and my grandma would call all me and my girl cousins up to the kitchen whenever she would cook, so that she could show us and teach us how to cook, and how to be a good homemaker. But she wouldn't call my boy cousins. Whenever we were done eating as well, we had to clean the dishes, but my boy cousins, they could just go back to play.
And that's what we were talking about earlier. That is also a gender thing. The experiences are different being the oldest daughter than being the oldest son. I feel like that comes with another set of responsibilities, maybe more financial responsibilities, right? And having to be the provider, the man of the house one day, carry on the legacy of the family, They have other pressures, but I think the gender one is very tough, because regardless, it's very taxing emotionally and mentally as well to take care of the house, to do all the chores.
Yeah, I feel like it was made seem as to like, that's my only purpose as a woman, to be a homemaker, to provide for my husband, food and warmth and love. But that's not my only identity, that I don't want it to be my only identity. And I feel like, unfortunately, for the longest time, I thought it was. I thought that was the only thing that I could be. So I'm glad that I grew out of that. I'm glad that that wasn't ingrained in my brain for a long, long time, to be honest.
Because that's not the way it should be.
Yeah, no.
We're free to do whatever we want.
Yes.
I do believe that parenting style changes with each child. I do feel like they get softer, to the point that I'm like, stop babying my little sister, the youngest one, right? I also think that our environments really shape how we are raised, because high school is so different to what high school is now for the kids nowadays, like the Gen Alpha. A whole other set of problems. We'll talk about that later. And I'm going to share an anecdote from one of my closest friends. She's the middle child. Her oldest sister she has a bit of a victim mentality. She blames her parents for everything. She is still a trailblazer. She was still the first one to graduate college, but she does blame her parents for a lot of her hardships. Herself, she's the middle child. She's the forgotten child. She's very quiet. She minds her own business.
Your friend?
Yes. But the twins, the youngest ones, they are rebellious. They definitely don't give a fuck about anything, about consequences or anything like that. And she told me that she feels like technology also has an effect on how children are raised, because she told me that she has a Ring camera at her house, and the twins figure out a way to just disconnect it by turning off the Wi-Fi. And they would sneak in their boyfriends and boys. So technology, your surroundings, and it really does affect the parenting style and how you were raised.
What do you think that, your experience of being the oldest child taught you?
Whoa. I think being the oldest daughter is one of the hardest jobs out there, and no other job will compare. We get to wear so many hats, which allowed me to be resourceful and flexible in many aspects of my life, with personal projects, with work, with my friends. Sometimes I am the organizer, like, come on, girls, organize without me. And I also learned to empower other people by guiding them to the answer and not giving them the answer right away. Because I don't want to bear that responsibility. I did it for 18 years. Basta, right? And so it's something that I always have in my mind, and being the trailblazer, it's going to take me 3 or 4 times to get it right, but that doesn't mean that I'm not capable of, because there was no one before us. We were the first ones to figure things out.
We're the guinea pig.
Exactly. What about you?
For me, it honestly taught me to be a risk taker, and it taught me to love to look after myself. Like, I have a high perception of myself and my capabilities, and I know that I'm a hardworking Latina, and I know through experience that anything that I set my mind to, I'm gonna be able to get it. I'm gonna be able to accomplish it. And like you said, I've learned to be adaptable, and I have come to learn and to realize that if I were to learn something new today, figure something out today that I didn't know, I know that I would be fine. I know that by the next day or the next few days, I would be a master at it, because I'm the eldest daughter.
We've talked a lot about our traumas, but how now at this age of 25 and 23, how do we heal that inner child and the wounds from being the oldest?
For me, honestly, I have learned that not everything falls on me. I don't have to be perfect in every way, shape, and form. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to be strong all the time. And showing vulnerability and asking for help does not make you weak. It doesn't make you a weak person in general. And if anything, being a role model and the oldest sibling, it's not my only identity. And it doesn't mean that I can't ever mess up. Being a good role model means embracing those mistakes, because the way that you navigate through them, they'll help you become who you need to be. And I'm just grateful, honestly, that I'm the eldest daughter, because it was a lot of pressure. And I guess the way that I see it, it's a blessing disguised as a curse. I'm proud of being the oldest child, and I don't think that, even though it was tough, I wouldn't ever change it.
Yeah, likewise. I can definitely resonate with that. The way I heal my inner child is by not rushing to grow up. I'm not going to get married tomorrow. I'm not going to have children anytime soon. I just want to enjoy myself, my favorite snacks, watch Disney all day long, be like that teenager that I was not allowed to be, because of all the expectations, whether that was self-imposed or imposed, And I'm also financially stable enough to like invest in my hobbies, like dance, and also go to amusement parks, go to museums, have those experiences. And so at this stage of my life, I just really want to enjoy everything. Take it slow and enjoy everything. And that's all I can ever ask for, honestly, right now.
Aw, I love that. It sounds like we're both growing even more.
Yes.
That was a good episode,
Yes.
honestly. I had fun talking about it, and I think that it was, it's not something that I see a lot. And I hope that you heard something that you needed to hear today. I hope that you were able to realize that you're not alone, and you were able to identify yourself with anything that we could have said. Thank you so much, honestly, for clicking on this video, for choosing to be here, for your precious time. I love doing this, and I want to keep on doing this for as long as I possibly can.
Yes. Thank you for all the support.
Yes.
And that's it. See you
See you
next time.
Bye.